Hey friends, it's Scott. I'm going to take a moment in the middle of the show here and thank our new sponsor, Tuple. I'm chatting with Johnny Marlar. Johnny, pair programming is kind of a niche thing, right? Like I know a lot of devs that don't pair much at all. Do you really think it's worth pair programming?
Yeah, I think even if you're the best programmer in the world, there's always something you can learn from other people. And, I think there's nothing like pairing that enables you to exchange like really technical expertise. For example, I'm really systems oriented. I have exhaustive error handling. I wrote my own X11 library because the error handling wasn't good enough. And my coworker Mikey, he's completely different. He's really an expert on Mac OS. He's a big Objective C fan. But because we've paired so much, we've slowly been able to build up expertise in each other's domains and styles. And he's taken some stuff from me and vice versa. It's been really good to have that regular pairing and exchange of ideas and information. So I think it's really hard to get that. And it's also hard to stay on the same page when you're not pairing with somebody. Instead of, trying to send comments to each other in a GitHub pull request and maybe arguing over something, being able to slow down and take that time and work on something real with somebody, there's just nothing that replaces it.
Very cool. I think more people should try pairing. I did a lot of pairing in person, and the nearest thing you can do from pairing in person is using something like Tuple. You can check it out at tuple.app. It's the best remote pair programming app on both macOS and Windows. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hanselminutes. Today I'm chatting with Bobby Lockhart. He's got a brand new book out called The Game Designer's Workbook. You can check it out at gamedesignersworkbook.com. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Man, I love looking at people's LinkedIns and people's websites, and it's always kind of impressive when someone starts with an award-winning game designer, filmmaking, computer science, games. You're a creative, aren't you?
I am, yeah. And I've been sort of bouncing back and forth between left and right brain for a long time. Like I went to an engineering high school and discovered there that I wanted to work in film. So I went to NYU Film School and discovered there that I wanted to do computer stuff. So yeah, it's been a ping pong. And then I wish somebody had seen this pattern and been like, you should work in video games, man. It's both.
If only they told you earlier.
Exactly. I had no idea until much later.
And now you lead important little games. You do freelance game design, but there's education running through everything that you do. You're not just making games, you're making educational games, you're making fun games, you're making games that like change the way your brain works. Were you always thinking about like pedagogy and like how brains develop? Because there are people who just make fun games, but you seem, from my perspective, to be putting more thought into it than the average Joe or Jane game designer.
I'm so glad that that's coming across. Yeah, I mean, the reason I got into games is I read this book called The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. Have you read the Diamond Age?
Yeah, I read most of Neil Stephenson's stuff. Diamond Age is a long book.
I really wish that there was some stuff, there was an edited version that was more kid friendly, because there's some weird adult stuff in there. But there's also a depiction of kind of an ideal educational game. This book called The Young Ladies Illustrated Primer. And I was so inspired by reading this science fiction story. I was like, who is working on this? And at first I thought, okay, this is going to be a really fancy AI powered something that, surveils the user, determines what to teach, creates an optimal pedagogical strategy, translates that into a narrative, embeds it with puzzles and whatever. But since then have sort of realized that that's, even if we could do that, that's maybe not the best approach. My sort of life mission these days is to contribute towards an ecosystem of learning games so broad that someone could potentially self-select their way through an entire education in whatever they want to learn purely through games. That's not possible, and in some cases for some types of subjects, probably not advisable, but it would be so amazing if it was possible.
Do games have to teach? Like, am I learning in every single time I play a game, no matter what the game is?
Yes, all games teach. Usually they just teach you how to play the game. Sometimes they teach you how to spend money on the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah. In-app purchases suck.
So, yeah, the sort of fundamental theory of educational games design is find what is fun, interesting about the subject that you want to teach and make that the core game mechanic. If you make anything else the core game mechanic, then it will feel like what we call in the biz chocolate covered broccoli.
Get the kids to eat their broccoli, but they're going to go, "Ew, what is this?" and spit it out anyway.
Exactly. It's like, so I don't know if you remember Math Blasters.
So
I know
good.
it's very beloved because it's so foundational, so early.
Everyone's got the generational foundational game. Like my kids love, there was a game called Stack the States that was effectively Tetris, except it was states of the United States or countries. It was Stack the Countries was another one. So it's, imagine Tetris. There's a line at the top, which is the don't go above this line. And then we're just going to drop countries. So it's like,
how did you clear countries?
So you have to rotate them and get like Brazil a certain way, and it drops to the bottom and it floats down, and there's like really cool physics. So like the two-dimensional map shape of Brazil drops down, and then you got to fit Luxembourg into like Brazil's armpit and
I see.
get as many states and countries as you want, and then declare that this is, and you learn the states. This is not a game I grew up on, but man, my kids know the shape of every country on the planet because of this stupid game, and they are obsessed with it. And so I just went, for Math Blaster, they would do the same for the Stack the States.
Yeah, it's funny. There's sort of like a sensitive developmental period where memorization is just really attractive. And if you catch a kid in that period, you can get them to learn a list of almost anything. For a lot of people, it's Pokemon. But if you could get it to be, the periodic table or something, it would be, or
the multiplication tables. I'm still a little iffy on the 7s and 6s, and I don't know what happened there.
I've never actually learned them. I learned like a few touch points, and then I just add multiples of whatever in my head. It. Yeah, exactly. But I brought up Math Blasters because it's like classic chocolate covered broccoli. You're piloting this spaceship around, and it's super fun, and then it kind of pauses and gives you a math quiz. And so you learn that math is sort of the thing that's in the way of fun instead of being the thing that is fun.
Oh, that is a really good way to put it. Math was in the way of fun. That is exactly right. That's exactly right. That actually makes me remember Code Combat. Did you work on Code Combat for a time?
I did work on Code Combat, yeah. And subsequent Code Combat products like Ozaria, Code Combat Worlds for Roblox.
Code Combat was peak, like for my kids, and even now I call that back, where it's like everything that's great about Zelda plus coding. It's just like my two favorite things, and having my kids just play the heck out of Code Combat when they were like 9 and 12.
That is so delightful to hear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a super authentic one, like to the point where you're even typing. Like a lot of coding games, I've worked on a bunch of coding games, learn to code games, you could call them. Most of them have some kind of abstraction to make it feel easier to get over the hump of syntax. But on Code Combat and Code Combat Worlds and all of those, we just took it head on. You're typing in a text field, and whether it runs, you can have syntax errors, you can have logic errors.
Why was it that Code Combat popped so much? Was it just because it was good looking? Was it because it was familiar? Like, what was it that made it like work?
Good question. Yeah, I think a lot. I mean, I'm the type of person who attributes a lot of things to luck. Some of it is right place, right time. it was on the web. So right when schools were getting Chromebooks, and it happened to get in front of the Y Combinator folks at the right time. Yeah, but it also has really approachable challenges. I think it demonstrates why some of these coding concepts are useful in a context that doesn't require a lot of explanation. Like if you need to get a password from somebody and remember it, you need a variable, and then you bring it over to something or tell it to someone so that they can say it to the magical door to open. It just makes these concepts feel more tangible.
Yeah.
Although that's kind of another key part of all educational games design is Seymour Papert once said, like, French isn't difficult for kids in France. Why is it difficult for kids in the US? Because their whole context, all of their like social capital, all of their ability to get things done is based on their ability to speak French. If you want to teach kids math, you create a context like France is for French. You create Mathland for math, and kids will learn it. And so all educational games, well, not all, but a lot of really well-designed educational games try to create a context where it's critical that seventh grade Spanish or whatever the subject is.
There was a time when I was at a conference called XOXO in Portland. It's kind of like South by Southwest, except Portland style, which makes sense because Portland and Austin are two sides of the same coin. So, South by Southwest is this big tech education festival thing, and XOXO was a big one. And I bumped into a guy, and we were talking about education, and I was like, you should get this game called Robot Turtles, which was a game like Logo that was a board game for teaching kids. And the guy I was talking to was Dan Shapiro, the guy who invented Robot Turtles. So in sitting and geeking out about game design and teaching kids how to code, I ended up trying to sell Robot Turtles to the guy who invented it. I didn't put two and two together. And he's like,
how long did he let you talk about it?
He let me go for like 4 minutes before he was like, oh yeah, that was me. That was me and Elon Lee, and we did that together.
Wow. That's great market research when you can let someone talk to you about what they like about the thing that you made.
Oh, yeah. I was just going off and, you should teach your kids. Yeah, because I learned how to move turtles around with a game called Logo.
Logo, yeah.
Right?
Where that's Seymour Papert. I mean, the guy I just quoted created Logo.
See, there you go. It's all full circle. And and Dan and made with Elon Lee made this board game, Robot Turtles, which is totally appropriate for 5 and 6 year olds, and they learn coding without knowing that they're learning coding. And the coding on ramp from Robot Turtles into Code Combat was my go-to. I would start the kids out. Before because I don't want screen time for a 5-year-old. So 4, 5, 6 Robot Turtles, 7, 8, 9, 12. That's Code Combat time.
Yeah, that's a great pathway.
Yeah, it's worked out so far. Hey friends, this is Scott. I want to take a moment to thank our new sponsor, Postman Flows. I was chatting with Roderick from Postman. Roderick, what is one thing that you thought would be simple, but it turned out to be surprisingly hard? And what did you learn from it?
I think my biggest learning has been that AI can only compensate for what you don't know only so much. So if you really don't know what you're doing, you really can't wield AI in very powerful ways. Particularly when you're composing APIs together or you're building a UI, you can get to good outcomes from scratch. But if you're iterating, you really have to start understanding what's actually happening under the covers. And you just have to peel the layers of abstraction, at least where we are today. That may change in the future. And I found that visual languages, visual construction helps me quite a bit in that regard. So if you're an expert, you're now world-class. But if you're a newbie, then you're still a newbie, just with more dangerous capabilities. And that's where it's an exciting world for us. We have to make sure that we're building and empowering people with the right tools, with the right guardrails, so that they can create good things, but not do harm, particularly when you connect them to APIs that can send payments or do transactions on your behalf.
One of the great tools for visualizing how easy it is to do this kind of work is Postman Flows. It lets you orchestrate APIs, logic, and data visually. You can check them out at postman.com/Hanselminutes. So you've been doing educational games, inventing toys for years. The book right now is called The Game Designer's Workbook. Mm-hmm. And it's worth calling out that it is not the game designer's book. It's the game designer's workbook. There's a lot of not blank pages, but there's a lot of, homework inside the book where you're expecting people to work through problems rather than just lecturing at them. You almost made the game, the book a game because they have to participate.
That is exactly the feeling I was going for, is to make the exercises themselves really playful, and let you turn certain game design concept around in your hands the way you would a Rubik's Cube, and try to understand all of its facets by actually working with it rather than by reading about it. I also, the more time I spend as a game designer, the less dogmatic I am about how game design should be done and how it works. And so part of it was I don't have a lot of prescriptive advice to give, but I do think that I can help people find their own voice and what they value about game design. And that can only be done as a process, not as a lecture.
It felt very Socratic method. Like you're asking questions. It's filled with questions where you're asking them like, who are you? Who is the game designer in you? There's a lot of sections on reflective, like let's just pause for a second and let's look back on this. I expected it to be dogmatic.
Yeah, I mean, the reflection chapters, a lot of that comes from, again, the background as a learning games designer, because the research tells us that after a lecture or any kind of a lesson, including playing with an educational game, that knowledge gets better solidified if there is dedicated reflection time afterwards. So if the learner does some introspection after they experience any kind of learning experience, then it's just better for them long term. They have time to sort of build the right neural pathways to keep that going. So some of it is that just pragmatic stuff, but also, there's questions and sort of lore and self-image. As you become a game designer, you want to be like, where do I fit in this? I do a lot of mentoring, actually, of early career game designers who are trying to get into the industry, which is nigh impossible at the moment, unfortunately. But a lot of the discussion we have is just talking about what kind of game designer are you going to try to be? And part of that is like market realities, like who's getting hired. And part of it is, what do you enjoy making, which is very different from what you enjoy playing often. And what kind of brain do you have? Do you have a puzzle making brain? Do you have a story making brain? All of these types of skills are useful for game design.
Yeah. I had 3 episodes ago, I had Noel Berry, who made Celeste, on. I've had the gentleman who made Axiom Verge on, Thomas Happ. And I wonder when someone, and by the way, I also went to see the Stardew Valley Orchestra. They're touring, playing Stardew Valley music. So I saw the designer, I forgot his name, something Monkey, who made Stardew Valley. Yeah. He has a nom de guerre. So I wonder sometimes if you hit a home run and you like come up with a Celeste or a Stardew Valley or a an Axiom Verge, and then it's like, okay, you made this. It's amazing. You nailed it. You hit a home run on the first try. Do you get stuck and now you're that person? Concerned Ape is his name, not Monkey. Eric Barone. Like, do you get stuck? Like, when you made Code Combat, did you ever feel like, okay, I've worked on Code Combat with the other folks at the company. Now this is what I have to do for the rest of my life?
No, in fact, I luckily have some friends at a place called Field Day Lab, and they hired me to work on some games that do very, very different things, like a game that teaches journalism and a VR game where you are in first person as a Delhi penguin, which is like a 3-foot penguin who lives in the Antarctic, and and a game about algae blooms. And that's just really useful to me, even though those are more like public media games. Those are all free. And so not as lucrative. Like the market really demands like STEM games, but these folks are making stuff that needs to be made and is also sort of award-winning in its own right. And it's such a great palate cleanser in between the teaching coding in various ways.
Yeah. In the book, and this is just my perspective as a non-game designer, you blur the lines between game and video game. I would even go so far, you didn't call it the video game designer's workbook. Yeah. You don't seem to make a differentiation between a maze on a piece of paper or D&D or a video game. Is the video part of video game not important to you? There's just games?
Yeah, I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves is when people include game design in STEM. In STEAM, yes, naturally. But in STEM, no. Game design
Maybe
is a
explain
humanity.
the difference between the two.
So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. STEAM adds art in the middle there. And often people object to STEAM because it sounds like it encompasses almost all of human endeavor, right? Science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. But in practice, what that means is really the other letters in service of art often. So, like people making crazy LED shows that correspond to dance or whatever, like people writing algorithms for visualizers and demo scene and stuff like that. That's all STEAM. But to call game design engineering is just to put it in engineering is a travesty, because game design is much older than computers. It's like 3,000 years old is the oldest game that we know the rules of. Senet, the Egyptian game. So people have been doing this a really, really long time, and it just belongs to a different lineage. And you can do it with all kinds of things. You can do it with tabletop minis. You can do it entirely in your head. One of my favorite books is Top 10 Games You Can Play by Yourself in Your Head. Play in your head by yourself.
So you're saying, forgive me, I want to poke on this a little bit. You're saying game design is an art, or it's
no, it is.
science?
It is. It's
like, what
not.
Are you
it's not science or engineering.
It's not science.
Yeah. It makes use of science. It makes use of math. It makes use of engineering sometimes, depending on what type of game you're making. But it's a humanity. It's something designed for other human minds.
That's so interesting, because there's like game. I know this is not a direct parallel, but there's game theory, which is literally a science. There's people with PhDs in game theory.
Yes. So game theory, unfortunately, has nothing to do with ludology, which is the study of games.
New word for me, ludology.
Yeah. Game theory is like economics almost. It's like,
yeah.
If you do this, I should do that.
So that's gaming. Ludology is gaming theory, the study of games, the playing, the cultures, the everything around making games and gaming. Interesting.
Yeah, it's more of a sociological study.
Okay. This is interesting. So you break down every kind of game. You go back into history. There's Sokoban puzzles, which are pushing, warehouse boxes around. We've all played stuff like that before. You go through the basics of like tic-tac-toe and Connect Four. And, by the end, you've given them almost a full, 1,000 years of games. They've made a dozen games within it. What do you want people at the end of the book to be enabled to be able to do?
I think part of it is to be able to join in conversation with other game designers and have the vocabulary and the experience to talk about the problems of making certain types of games on an informed level. And part of it is just confidence that they can make something of their own going forward that's of a greater scale. I mean, very few of these exercises ask you to make a whole game. It's often just bits and pieces.
The important part of the game. Like you're asking us to think about the loop, the game loop, the meat, the thing that makes the game interesting, the maze. You're not necessarily in this book, from my perspective, having people come up with entirely new rules. You're showcasing a dozen different styles of rules and then saying, play within this sandbox.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so, unlike, starting an indie game project by yourself, the constraints are given to you. Of course, starting an indie game project, it sounds like it's limitless, but of course you have the limits of your resources and your imagination. But have you ever read Rebel Without a Crew?
Don't think so.
It's Robert Rodriguez's book about making mariachi.
Oh, he made El Mariachi for $8,000.
Exactly.
And when he was pushing around the camera, he was actually pushing his buddy in a wheelchair, and that was their dolly.
Yeah, so all of that type of stories is outlined essentially in a journal that's in this book, Rebel Without a Crew, and he talks about how all of the narrative choices they made for that movie were corresponding to the constraints that they had. Like, oh, they have this really neat, ornate looking letter opener. Let's make that like a knife that the villain has. And oh, we have this like clawfoot tub. Okay, that's going to look great in this scene or whatever. We have a guitar and a guitar case. Like so he wrote the story around what he had rather than trying to get what he needed to make some like blue sky story. And I feel like that's how people ought to approach game design as well. Sometimes, you are good at writing stories. Make a visual novel.
Isn't creativity where creativity is where boredom and constraints, meet? And maybe you have the wheel or the tire from a bicycle, and you have a stick. Okay, now we're going to roll that thing around.
Exactly.
It reminds me of the scene in The Princess Bride when Wesley is paralyzed and they're trying to storm the castle, and he's like, "Well, I mean, there's no way we can do this." I mean, if we had a wheelbarrow. And the guy's like, "Oh, we have a wheelbarrow." I was like, "Why didn't you tell me we had a wheelbarrow? That changes everything."
Yeah, exactly. There's a game designer named Carol Mertz who just released a collection of things called Play With Your Junk. And it's like, here are some games that you can play with just junk that you own already. I love things like that where we're playing within these tight constraints. Mm-hmm. But yeah, in the book, we give you some constraints, and the book itself is a constraint. It has to be stuff that you can do with a pencil and just the book and your own mind. Yeah. So there's a lot of workarounds we had to do just for that, like randomness, for example. How do you get randomness built into this? And what we did was put rows and rows of dice in the margins, randomly generated, and we say, think before you look at the dice, think of a number between 1 and 10, cross off that many dice, and then just start going from there. And then you'll have like a random series, and it'll be different. If you keep going, you come back to that chapter and keep going, or somebody else thinks of a different number, they'll have a different random sequence.
So at the beginning of the conversation, you said that all games teach the player something. Like all games have to be educational games. And you have a blog post called All AAA Games Should Also Be Educational Games. So this theory, you said Ralph Koster's book, A Theory of Fun, calls out that fun is the feeling that I learned something. I've been rewarded because something has been learned. As we get towards the end of the show here, I thought it'd be interesting if we compared maybe the last 2 or 3 games each of us played that made our brains swell in that, like, oh my God, I learned something, and what and why we learned about it. So as an example, I'll go first. The new Indiana Jones game, AAA game, goes back and forth. Its game loop is basically climbing. So you're running around climbing stuff, Tomb Raider style, fighting dudes, punching folks, or incredibly calm, chill, walking around on shelves, reading stuff. Like literally the game starts with a big fight against a big dude, and then you have to clean up the museum by picking up the objects that were destroyed in the fight and putting them back on the shelf correctly in the museum. So I found myself, much like Assassin's Creed, wandering around, like just reading plaques in a museum. And I thought that was such an interesting juxtaposition, and I felt that was a very educational game.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I can shout out my friend's puzzle. He has a daily puzzle called Rattle
Rattle.
RADDLE.quest, I believe. And it's a word puzzle game where you're trying to match words with clues. It's like if you had the clues from a crossword, but the clues were missing words, and you had to figure out which. And they proceed from the following word. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's like
I'm looking at it right now. So today's is from tomato to shade. And I'm supposed to get from the word tomato to the word shade. And it looks like I'm supposed to get there in 8 or 9 tries.
Exactly.
And what am I supposed to type? Am I supposed to type a word?
Yeah. So the next word starts with, it puts in the word tomato into one of the clues. There's blanks in the clues. Imagine putting the word tomato in. It actually does it for you.
Okay.
So all of them say tomato, but you have to figure out which one makes sense with the word tomato in there, and then answer that question with a word that has the specified length.
Oh, okay. And then, so there's a bunch of clues that are out of order, and the next word has 6 letters, and I need to figure out what that is.
Yeah. So I've been playing this. I actually haven't played today's, but I've been playing this religiously for a while. And it's really fascinating, especially when sometimes you get stuck and you have to solve in reverse. And it really is, I just love the feeling of doing something in reverse, rewiring your brain to do the same thing but opposite. So like when you get the power pellet in Pac-Man, and now instead of running away, now you're chasing, or like like in some pinball games where you have like Black Hole, where you have a lower black back glass where the paddles are now hitting the ball up towards you instead of up away from you. Just, I love that pattern, and this little web puzzle game allows me to satisfy that sometimes.
Very cool. That is at RADDLE.quest. Yes. Definitely different than the Wordle, quite challenging, and you're gonna spend some time feeling your brain change and rewire itself as you learn this.
For sure.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much, Bobby Lockhart, for hanging out with me today.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. Thanks, Scott.
You can learn more about what Bobby's doing at BobbyLox.com, and you can pick up the Game Designer's Workbook at GameDesignersWorkbook.com that he wrote along with Eric Lang. This has been another episode of Hanselminutes, and we'll see you again next week.